Hi, my name's Ryan, and I run a group called Google Developer Group Cloud Pasadena, and I'm going to show you how to integrate Stripe checkout with Firebase Functions. By the end of the tutorial, this is what you'll end up with. Here we have a storefront with some checkout buttons. Click on checkout for your item. It brings you over to Stripe checkout. Enter your information. Press pay. The payment's processed, it brings us over to a success screen, and that's it. So for security, Stripe requires us to put its code on a server, and I don't want to maintain an extra server, and I already have my data for my projects on Firebase. So I put this project together using Cloud Functions or Firebase Functions, just so everything is going to be all on Firebase for me. And I don't have to worry about the server ever going down, because now it's going to be serverless. So here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to build the Firebase app, then the Angular storefront, then we're going to add in Stripe checkout, and then I'm going to show you what you need to do to build this for production. In test mode, we're going to emulate all of the Firebase functions. It's a lot faster. So let's get started with Firebase. First thing is, let's go to the Firebase console. Okay, let's add the project. We're going to call it storefront. There's no reason for analytics right now. You can have it if you like. And create project. Okay, now I want to tell it that we want a web app. So project overview, and we choose web. The nickname doesn't matter. We're not going to reference it. So I'm just going to call it store and click register. Okay, we're going to grab this Firebase config. We're going to come back to it in our Angular app. So for now, just put it into your text editor. Now the first thing I want to do is just throw in some documents so that my storefront will have items to sell. And you can absolutely skip this for your project, but just take a look at the fields that I'm going to use. So I'm going to start in test mode. And now we need to choose a location, and it's not very easy to tell what to choose. So go to this site, scroll down just a bit, and you'll see what all the regions are. Click enable, and we're going to create a collection of clothes. Now, I always suggest to have a document ID that you control. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, any numbers, or email addresses. In this case, I'm going to make it more difficult for myself because I'm going to show you both the regular code, if you control the document IDs, as well as when you can't. So I'm going to go for auto IDs, price, okay, an image, and I'm going to put in a path to an image online. I'm going to do this for a few items. Okay, so I have 3 items to work with. Again, I really suggest that for your documents, you control the doc ID, but I want to make this so that people who can't control it can still see the code. It's a little different. So we have our Firestore database. This is going to populate everything in our front end. Now let's include functions. So here's serverless, Cloud Functions. We need to upgrade the project to Blaze. Click purchase. And it's important to set a budget. As you try things out, we're going to be using the emulator, but still, always set yourself a budget. I'm just saying $2. And for this project, it's completely free. Now it's time to actually do the code. Okay, so we're going to have 2 projects. One is for our Firebase functions, one is for our Angular app. I'm going to make one folder to cover both of them. Angular, Fire, and Stripe. CD, Angular, Fire, Stripe. And now I'm going to make a folder for our Firebase functions. We'll come back and build the other folder for Angular soon. And jump into that folder. So we're going to install the Firebase CLI, npm install -g global Firebase tools. And now we're going to let Firebase know this is a Firebase functions project. So npm install Firebase functions at latest, and Firebase admin at latest. If this is your first time using the Firebase CLI, you type Firebase, log in, follow those steps. I'm just going to say init. Init will be after you log in. Okay, use your arrow keys, drop down to Functions, and press a space bar, enter. We want to use an existing project. It's storefront. And we want to use JavaScript. We don't want the linter. So we want to install the dependencies now. Okay, next command, Firebase use --add. And we choose our project again. Storefront. And the alias, I'm just going to call it store. We're not going to reference this alias. Now, if we look at what the Firebase init command did, it gives us a lot of files in this folder, and we're going to jump into the newly created functions folder. And for this whole project, we have to install Stripe twice, once for Firebase, once for Angular. So now we're in the Firebase Functions folder. Type npm install or I Stripe. Now I'm going to go to the top level. So here we are at the top level. I'm going to open my code editor. Okay, jump into Firebase Functions, into Functions, and then index.js. First thing we're going to do is remove the hello world. And the next thing is we're going to add more constants. So right here, functions, this is where we tack on our functions for the cloud. Okay, the very first piece we want to add in is making a const of Stripe. You're going to put your secret test key here. If you don't know where to find that, you just go to this path, stripe.com/docs/keys. The next piece we're going to add is Firebase admin. This one again is just if you need to query your Firebase database, which is a very good thing to do because you never want your clients to have access to the price information. So you always want to bring in from the client side just the ID of the item you want to purchase, go check what the price is on your database, and then run that payment. Now, I mentioned that there's two ways to do this function. You can do it with or without Firestore queries. I strongly suggest going with. If you went without, this is all the code you'd use. So we create a function that we can call through HTTPS that's called Stripe checkout without DB queries. And when we call this function, we pass into the body the product name and the price. We grab those two values, and then when we create the Stripe checkout session, we just add product name, an image, and the price that we've passed in. So we're going to get rid of this. I'll leave this code in the description though. And here's the code we're going to use. Now, there's a lot here, but I'll walk you through all of it. So the function that we're going to create is called on HTTPS, and it's called Stripe checkout. In the Angular side, you're going to see that we're going to pass in the ID. So this is just the ID of the item to be purchased, and we're going to receive that as product ID. Now, if you know what the doc ID is, and we don't in this example because it's all auto-created. If you know what the ID is, just uncomment this code and use it. Don't use the following. All you have to do is go to the Firestore, go to your clothing collection, and use your doc ID, whichever it is, and then you can retrieve the price, the name, any other metadata you want. But I'm doing the harder example. We don't know what our doc ID is. And that's why one of our fields is ID. ID1, ID2, ID3. So that's what's passed in. Here, we're going to open up Firestore, go to the clothing collection, and search where the ID is the ID we grabbed from the call. Once we have that snapshot, we're going to the first element, because there's only one document with that ID, and then we grab all the information we want. If we couldn't find the document, we can log that. So we're going to create our Stripe session, and using the price that we just received, we're going to multiply it by 100, because Stripe uses cents, And that creates our session, and we return the session ID. One more important thing is we have two links that we also give Stripe. We give the success link, and we give the cancellation, normally called failure. Could be a network failure, or they chose just to not go through with the payment. Notice that we're going back to our local host. In production, you want to change this address. Okay, so now this is all the code we need. We don't want to put it up to the cloud yet. We want to test locally, because you'll want to change this code, and every time you upload to the cloud, it takes about a minute. And when you test locally, you can do it really quickly. So to test local, I'm going to open up a new tab. Okay, so I'm at the top level of my Firebase Functions project, and I'm going to type Firebase emulators : start. So here's the important part. Firebase is going to show you the name of the functions. Each one gets its own address. It's not the address we care about, but the port that it runs on. It's usually 5000 or 5001. So just keep that in mind. We're going to add that into our Angular code. Let's go ahead and build the Angular app. So I'm at the top level. All I need to do is Angular new, ng new, and I'll call this storefront. Do I want strict type checking? No. Add routing? Yes. And CSS. So now I'm going to add Angular Fire, ng add at Angular/Fire. Okay, the project. We're going to choose storefront. And now, just for styling, we're going to add Angular material. Any style will do. Typography we want. And browser animations, it doesn't matter. If you don't use them, they'll be pulled out for production. Okay, that's all we need. Let's go start our storefront. So Angular serve. Now the port is important. It needs to be the port that's shown on our Firebase function. So port 4205, and when it's ready, we'll have it open. Let's make one more tab because we have some more commands to type for the Angular side. Okay, first thing I want to do is get rid of everything. Just have a blank slate. And to do that, we go to storefront, source, app, and app component.html. Go to the very bottom of your code. The only thing we're going to keep is that last set of tags. Just the router outlet. Now everything is blank. It's great. I want to generate a home page. So Angular generate component GC home. Now we're going to put the home page in. Set source app routing module, and we're going to import the home component. And we're going to add the route, or routes really, to go to home. There we are. Now we can see home works. Okay, the next thing to do is to get Angular and Firebase to communicate with each other. And what we do for this is go to source, environments. Earlier, when we were building the Firebase app, we had some code we left aside, Firebase config. We're just going to get rid of the equal sign, so Firebase : put that in and get rid of the semicolon. If you're using Git, you want to make sure that your environment is never added to your project. So just go to the git ignore file, that's storefront, and then .git ignore, and just add source, environments, and then every subfolder with it. Now we're going to add in basic navigation. So let's go to storefront, source, app module ts. So for this bit, definitely grab the code that's in the description, because what I'm going to add in now is strictly for Angular material. Next, we're going to import everything for Angular Fire, and then we're going to import everything for material to make it look nice. Okay, that's it for the backend. Now we're going to go to home, and we're going to work on the CSS file, HTML, and TS. Copy. So in the HTML, we have two sections up top. These are the success and cancel bits of code. So you can skip these two pieces for right now. It's just once the transaction occurs, these will show. If the transaction hasn't occurred, then what we're going to see are cards for every item of clothing and a button for checkout. It's important that the button is called checkout button. Doesn't matter how many you have, but Stripe is going to attach its code to the item that has the ID of checkout button. For the TS file, first we're just going to make all of our imports so that we can work with Angular Firestore and Angular Firebase Functions. We have to use observables because we're working with Firebase documents, and we have to be able to authenticate ourselves, so we bring in the environment variables. So the next thing that comes down is these are the items in my storefront, clothes, and I have Stripe status. The status can either be empty, cancel, or success. We'll get to that. This is the status of the payment having succeeded or not. When the page initializes, we're just going to make a call to the clothing collection or clothes collection where the name is not null. So bring back all clothing items. And then we're going to check to see if we have a Stripe status, if the page has been reloaded after a payment. The checkout itself is pretty straightforward. All we do is we go to the environment and we ask it for the Stripe key, which we're going to put in next. Then we make a Firebase function HTTPS call to the Stripe checkout function that we created. And we're going to pass in this is going to bring back a Stripe session ID. Once that happens, we redirect to Stripe checkout hosted by Stripe with the session ID, and then we get our result afterwards. So what we need to do now is go back to the environment and add our Stripe key. Okay, to do that, just type Stripe and then key colon, and you can put in your shareable key. Now that we've put in our Stripe key into the environment, the page is alive. All we're going to do is go to checkout with Firebase, and I want to be on the emulator. I want to watch what happens. Because you can log here, just say console.log. There's one more piece we need to do. We need to go to storefront, source, index.html, and add a reference to the Stripe library. And we have to install Stripe. npm, we're on the storefront, the Angular side, npm install Stripe. Now let's check and see if this works. Click checkout. Yes. Okay, the first time anything happens, Firebase ramps up and gives you the resources. Every time after, it's faster and faster. So it's taken in all the information. It's taken in my link to the image. It's taken in the right price. You put in your information here. And for Stripe, just repeat 424242 for the credit card to succeed. There we go. Any date in the future, any CVC code, any name, and let's pay. Yes, and it'll bring us back to our app, to the success link. And this is why we have a success link in home.html. Stripe status, when it's success, we give this message. Let's reload home. Let's show you the fail case, or the cancel case now. I want to check out, but I'm going to decide to not pay for it. So I'll return, I'll go back, and we get action cancel. Transaction canceled, and that's this bit of code. Transaction canceled. Please select an item to purchase. Okay, that was it. It all works now, but it's still only working on our computers because we're using the emulator. We go back into Firebase Functions, but what we need to do is switch the address. Make it your actual domain. So when this actually finishes, it'll point back to your real website. Back on our tab for Firebase Functions, just write the command firebase deploy. This is going to take a minute, at least a minute. As this goes, let's go back to our project in Angular. Over in Angular on our homepage, on home.component.ts, we have a line of code that says use the emulator. Comment that line out. That's inside of the constructor. You can type the command ng build --prod on your Angular project, and you're going to see a dist folder, distribution folder. So storefront, distribution, storefront, You take every single file inside of this folder and you can put it on your website, and now everything will work. So we've just built the entire project. I really hope you enjoyed. Thank you.